3 weeks ago, I stood in a ballroom filled with 150 people, my father's colleagues, business partners, and family friends, and watched my mother lean into a microphone and say, "At least Sophia found a husband, even if we don't know what he does for a living." The room laughed. My father smiled. My sister smirked. And my husband, the man they had dismissed as a nobody for 4 years, slowly pushed back his chair and stood up. What happened next made my father's business partner drop her wine glass, made my mother go pale, and made my sister finally understand why I had never once asked our parents for money. It started 6 years ago, the night I met Nathaniel. I was 26, exhausted from a long day of parent-teacher conferences and desperate for caffeine. The coffee shop near my school was crowded, but there was one empty seat across from a man typing furiously on his laptop. "Mind if I sit here?" I asked. He looked up, dark eyes, warm smile, and said, "Please." We didn't talk much that first day. He worked. I graded papers. But when I got up to leave, he said, "Same time tomorrow." I came back. So did he. For 2 months, we shared that table. He told me he worked in education. I told him I taught third grade. He never asked about my family's money. I never asked about his. It was the first time someone saw me. Not my father's company. Not my sister's shadow. Just me. When Nathaniel finally asked me to dinner, I said yes before he finished the sentence. We dated for 2 years, simple dates, farmers markets, movie nights. He cooked for me in his modest apartment, and I fell in love with the way he really listened. When he proposed, I didn't tell my parents for 3 weeks. I already knew what they'd say. "He works in education," my mother said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "What does that even mean?" "It means he helps kids learn," I told her. She sighed like I'd said something naive and moved on. The signs were always there. I just didn't want to see them. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday dinner, the pattern repeated like a broken record. "Isabel, tell everyone about the Henderson deal," my mother would say, beaming at my sister. $2 million. Can you believe it? Isabel would flip her hair and launch into some story about client negotiations while the whole table leaned in. Then my mother would turn to me. "And Sophia, you're still teaching." She said, teaching the way someone might say unemployed. I'd try to share something meaningful. A student who had finally learned to read. A breakthrough moment in my classroom. And she would already be looking at her phone. That was sign number one. Sign number two hurt worse. My students had spent months preparing a spring play, memorizing lines, painting sets, making costumes from cardboard and glitter. I invited my parents. My father checked his calendar and said he had real meetings. He visited Isabel's office 12 times that year. I counted. The week before the play, Isabel leaned over at Sunday brunch and whispered loud enough for the whole table to hear, "You know Dad's disappointed, right? You had the same opportunities I did." I wanted to scream that our opportunities were never the same. She wanted the corner office. I wanted to matter to someone. But I smiled and said nothing. Nathaniel was sitting right there. He heard every word. That night he held me and said, "Your worth isn't determined by them." I wanted to believe him, but those small humiliations were just the warm-up. The retirement party invitation arrived on a Tuesday, an email, not even a proper card. My sister Isabel received a hand-calligraphed invitation delivered by courier. I knew because she posted it on Instagram. My mother called that evening to discuss seating arrangements. "You and Nathaniel will be at table 14, she said. I pulled up the venue layout on my laptop. Table 14 was in the back corner near the kitchen doors. "We have important guests," she explained. "The Hargroves are coming. People your father actually does business with." She paused before hanging up. "Diana, wear something nice. Try not to talk too much about your little school. These people have real careers." That night, I sat on the edge of our bed staring at my phone. Nathaniel came in, saw my face, and said, "They seated us by the kitchen, didn't they?" I nodded. "Do you want me to come?" Part of me wanted to protect him from them. Another part, a part I had been silencing for years, was tired of facing them alone. "Yes," I whispered. "Please." He took my hand and said, "I've been quiet for 4 years because you asked me to. But if they hurt you again, I won't just sit there." His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it I hadn't heard before. The night before the party, Nathaniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out a plain white envelope. Sick, official looking. He slid it into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. "What's that?" I asked. "Insurance," he said. "For you. In case they go too far." I didn't ask what was inside. Part of me hoped we wouldn't need it. The grand ballroom of the Hartwell Hotel was everything my father loved. Excessive, expensive, and designed to impress. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, a 12-piece orchestra playing soft jazz, 150 guests in designer gowns and tailored suits, all gathered to celebrate my father's 40 years of excellence. Nathaniel and I arrived at 7. He wore a simple navy suit. I wore a black dress I'd bought on sale 3 years ago. My mother stood at the entrance greeting guests like royalty receiving subjects. Her eyes flicked to Nathaniel. "Table 14 is in the back," she said. We already knew. Near the stage, my sister Isabel stood beside our father in a red designer gown, diamond earrings catching the light. She saw me and gave a little flutter of fingers that somehow felt condescending. Table 14 was worse than I expected. Every time a server passed, we had to pull in our chairs. As we sat down, a woman at the next table turned around. Expensive suit, sharp eyes. I recognized her. Genevieve Hargrove, one of my father's biggest business partners. She looked at Nathaniel, frowned slightly, tilted her head, then pulled out her phone and began scrolling. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, recognition. But before she could say anything, the lights dimmed. My father's speech was confident and commanding, the kind of voice that made people lean forward. He spoke about my sister with pride that swelled through the room. "Isabel has exceeded every expectation. She has my drive, my instincts, and frankly, my ruthlessness." Applause. Camera flashes. Then his eyes found me across the ballroom. He smiled, the smile he gave difficult clients. "And Sophia, my eldest?" A pause, too long. "She's still trying to figure out what to do with her life." Scattered laughter, awkward, uncomfortable. "But we love her anyway." He said it like a punchline. 150 people were looking at me, some pitying, some amused. Nathaniel's hand tightened around mine. Then my mother took the microphone. Her gaze swept the room and locked on me. "Our youngest, Isabel, has made us so proud, following in her father's footsteps." She paused. "And then there's Sophia. Our eldest has taken a different path. She teaches elementary school, 3rd grade, I think. But you know what? At least she found a husband." Another pause. "Even if we don't know what he does for a living." The room erupted in laughter, and I felt something break inside me. Not my heart. My patience. Beside me, Nathaniel slowly rose from his chair. He walked toward the stage, calm, measured, each step deliberate. Heads turned. Whispers rippled through the crowd. My father's smile faltered. Nathaniel stepped onto the stage and leaned into the microphone. "May I have a moment?" The room went silent. "I'm Nathaniel, Sophia's husband, the one you don't know anything about." He looked out at the sea of faces and spoke clearly, without anger, without drama. "For 4 years, I've sat at the back of your holiday dinners. I've listened to your wife mock my career. I've watched you dismiss your daughter like she's somehow less than. And I've stayed quiet because Sophia asked me to." He looked at me across the ballroom, his eyes soft. "But I won't stay quiet anymore." Isabel pushed through the crowd. "This is insane. Who does this guy think he is?" "Excellent question," Nathaniel said calmly. "Thank you for asking." He reached into his jacket. Not the envelope, not yet. He straightened his tie and faced the audience. "My name is Nathaniel Cole, and I believe some of you may have heard of my company." The room held its breath. Even my father looked uncertain. Genevieve Hargrove was already on her feet. "Robert," she said loudly. "Do you have any idea who this is?" "Edubridge, the educational technology company. They were just valued at $200 million. It was on the cover of Forbes 3 months ago." The name moved through the crowd like electricity. Phones came out. Eyes went wide. Isabel's face shifted from smug to something approaching horror. "Last year, Forbes named me one of their 30 under 30 in education," Nathaniel continued. I've been interviewed by CNN, MSNBC, and the Wall Street Journal. I've had lunch with senators and shaken hands with two presidents. He looked directly at Isabel. I don't make less than your assistant. But if I did, that still wouldn't justify what you said about my wife. Then he pulled out the envelope. This is a contract, he said, opening it slowly, a $5 million grant to fund STEM programs in underprivileged schools across the state. He looked at me, his eyes shining. The first recipient is Lincoln Elementary, Sophia's school. Tears streamed down my face. Not because of the money. Not because of the status, because for the first time in my life, someone was standing in front of my family and saying, Sophia matters. Your daughter teaches children who have nothing, Nathaniel continued. She shows up every single day for kids that society has forgotten. She buys supplies with her own money. She stays late to help struggling readers. She changes lives. He shook his head slowly. And you call her a disappointment? You call her a supporter? His voice was steady. Diana is the reason I built my company. Because I saw what teachers like her do, and I wanted to give them the tools they deserve. I work in education. I just happen to own the company. He stepped away from the microphone and walked toward me. The crowd parted silently. I stood up on shaking legs. When Nathaniel reached me, he took both my hands. I'm sorry I didn't do this sooner, he said quietly. I kept hoping they'd see you. The real you. The way I see you. Then I walked to that microphone myself. I'm Sophia Parker, I said, the disappointing daughter. For 32 years, I tried to earn my parents' approval. I chose a career I love, and they called it a waste. I married a man I love, and they called him a nobody. Tonight you found out my husband is successful by your definition of success. But here's the thing, that shouldn't change anything. The way you treated me was wrong before you knew about Nathaniel's company. And the fact that you're only interested now proves exactly what I always suspected. I looked at my parents. Respect is the minimum requirement, not optional, not conditional, just basic respect. If you can give me that, we can try again. If you can't, then this is goodbye. We turned and walked out. 150 people watched us go. In the car, Nathaniel drove while I stared at the city lights blurring through my tears. Are you okay? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. I feel empty, like I'd been holding something heavy for years and I finally put it down. He glanced at me. That's not empty. That's light. I laughed. A wet, broken sound, and for the first time in 32 years, I believed him.